And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to another high vibe conversation. I'm your host, 𝗦𝘁𝗲𝗲𝗏, and today we will be talking about Grief is Love. Joined with me today are 𝗦𝘁𝗲𝗏𝗏, Linda Vetrus-Nichols, Stina Marie, and Jenny Langren. Stina, I think I'm going to change things up a little bit and come to you first today. What's coming up for you when we talk about Grief is Love?
I'm so unprepared, 𝗦. Okay, what's coming up for me around grief is love. So I'm going to share a story from the last few days about my son regarding my dad. So we lost my dad about a year ago. It was January 2022. It's so hard to remember what year is what since the pandemic started. So a year ago, lost my dad to COVID, and he was in the hospital under COVID protocol. And then, the hospital had very limited visitors. And so I was the only one that got to really be there with him, see him, see the whole process. Family members couldn't come. Obviously, my kids couldn't go visit. And just this past week, my son was having some emotions come up around a breakup at school. So he's in 6th grade. And so there's lots of, I have a girlfriend, and then I got dumped, and then I have a girlfriend again, and then I broke up with her. And, it's just like every few weeks is something different. But in this particular time, like, we were processing through like how he was feeling, because the way that he reacted was kind of angry. And I was like, ooh, that may have come across kind of harsh to the other person. And it sounds like you cared about this person and liked them. And so in the course of that conversation, he said something that was such a bright light in the midst of lots of moments where I'm just like banging my head against the wall because I have a 12-year-old son, and anybody who's had a 12-year-old just knows that this is such a unique and special time in life where like things just go in one ear and out the other, and you never know what to kind of expect. And I said, I'm proud of you for sharing how you felt with someone. I'm proud of you for, thinking about how your words may have come across to this other person. And he said, yeah, I feel a lot more empathy. And I said, yeah. And I said, empathy is not always easy. And he's like, yeah, I have to be vulnerable to feel empathy. And he said, maybe why I struggle with empathy is because I don't want to be vulnerable. And I was like, wow, that's that's a lot to understand, about yourself. And then somehow like he was still like having like these emotions come up, and all he could get out was my dad's name, 𝗏𝘗𝗏𝗏, which is what he called, that's mother's father in Swedish. Um, and I was like, how is this connected to my dad? And this is where like grief is so interesting, because you can be having an experience as a 6th grade boy, getting broken up with your girlfriend, and all of a sudden there's a grief that bubbles up through all of it. And it's because the empathy and the vulnerability and the care and the love, all of those emotions start to remind you of, other experiences. And so there's like these threads that connect our relationships now to people that we miss. And so what he expressed was, he kind of felt in a way like my dad's death was his fault. In some way, that was his fault. And he said, I know it's not, but I still have this feeling. And I said, is it kind of like you should have been able to do something to stop it? Because that's a little bit different. Like, I caused it versus I should have been able to help. I should have been able to do something. And he said, yeah. And he said, when you said we could call him, I didn't even do that. And I was like, wow, Like, here's this little boy who had this opportunity to call his grandpa, which who knows how it would have even gone. Maybe my dad wouldn't even been awake. Like there's all these different variables, but looking back on it in his mind is what would have happened if I would have just called? What, would that have made a difference? Um, and so feeling that love that he had and that regret of like missing one opportunity, right? In the whole grand scheme of thing, his last opportunity to like give some of that love is like sticking with him. And I said to him, I said, I was there with him more than anyone else. And all I can think about is all the things I didn't say when I was there with him. So no matter how much time you get with someone, no matter what you do at the end, no matter what you say, don't say, do, don't do, like there's always more. There's always more love. And I think that even in a breakup, that's what makes it hard, right? Because he was having this feeling of, I love this, or not necessarily I love this person, but I like this person, I care about them. And right now, I can't be in a relationship with them. So there was that feeling of like, he's got care, he's got, some form of love about this person, and he can't give it to them in the way that he wants to be able to give it to them. So, you see grief in these little ways, and then it comes up in these like bigger, more obvious ways about people that have actually passed. But that's like the thing about being a human is like stories don't end. The stories that we tell, we're still learning about them now. We're still having these developments and epiphanies and ahas. Like, how many of us have connected dots about our childhood, right? Like, the story didn't end. You're still adding to it. You're still understanding it. And so grief is like ever present. It's the life, death, life cycle, where we're just always going through another loop, another learning, in our journeys. And it's full of love that, it's kind of like, I don't know what to do with this now that it can't go in this direction. Then you have to, that's also what creates inspiration, right? It's why people paint. It's why they write poetry. It's why we develop new friendships and new relationships, because we've got all this love inside of us and we're inspired to share it with someone somehow, to heal through connection.
Wow. Thank you, Stina. For someone who said that they a few minutes ago felt unprepared to speak on this, what you said really, really resonated. And where grief is love, grief also gets to be like our way to show that we care. Whether that's directly with another person or through art or music, it's a way to show that we are vulnerable, and still growing and changing. And what you were talking about, especially with your son navigating this experience of a breakup, and then having the memory and the reminder, of his grandfather, it reminds me of Robert Party's recent podcast about grief, where he's talking about how like you don't just get over it. Like you're meant to, and he quoted the Bible, you're meant to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, not like sit in it and ruminate in it and just like stay there. And I love the way that you shared about how your son is processing it and like exploring the different parts of himself. Like, well, maybe the reason that I'm struggling with empathy is because I don't actually want to be vulnerable. And so he's not just sitting in it. He is getting to know himself better by working and processing through the grief. And to your point about it being like an onion wasn't the word that you used, but we're talking about layers here of like, you're meant to go through it in different waves and cycles, and it's going to keep surfacing back up. And think that's such a powerful, multiple examples of how grief is love. So thank you for sharing. Um, I'm gonna keep going around the circle in this counterclockwise fashion that I'm looking at. Your view may be different, of course. Jenny, what's coming up for you when we talk about grief is love?
As you are sharing, Stina, what's coming up is that as long as people are in my life, either alive or just, in my life, it's my choice whether I express that love or not. And to me, grief is love that doesn't have anywhere to go. So this also means that the creative part of this, we have this experience of caring for someone. That's our choice to express it, to be creative, to tap into our inspiration. And when our creativity does not have an outlet, it builds up as anxiety. So I have so many conversations with my clients around grief and how it makes the choices look different. I get to share that love with someone else. I get to express my care for this person, or what they meant to me, or sometimes even how they hurt me, the things that are unresolved with other people. And when clients come to us, we know the value of sharing, the value of exhaling as early as possible in the process. But my personal story is that my brother passed away in a very traumatic way, the way that he chose to lay down in front of a train. And when those news hit me, I didn't expect that. I wasn't prepared to even share that because it happened. I couldn't even grasp, that's the shock, that's the trauma that it happened. And I remember feeling like it was this huge black book, just like inserted into my library of life. And this book was before me all of the time. Like going to sleep was this moment of peace and almost like forgetfulness or bliss, or like not remembering that this happened. And then waking up, there it was, this book in front of me, this grief. And I could only read it like all of the time throughout my day, just read and read and read of this new book in my library, this new chapter in my life. And I remember feeling like it came to a time when I had read it so many times and I had gotten to know it. And I had shared my grief with the people around me, and we had all put pieces to the puzzle to understand or make sense of things, or listen into what that means to me, and why is this important to me, and what is it teaching me about myself and what I value. It came to a point where I was actually able to place that book back on the bookshelf, and then it fell down again. And I read it a bit longer, but I was able to put it back up because I knew it. Like, I trusted what it meant to me and what it taught me. I opened up to the lessons and grew through it and learned from it. And I noticed that the times that it spent on the shelf and not before me controlling my life just, became longer and longer. And then I came to a point when I felt like I choose. It is always going to be there. And I value it for the lessons and for the love that I have for my brother. But I will choose when I bring it forth, and when I read, and when I share, and when I'm present with it. And then I can also choose with peace to place it there. And I know that it's always going to be there for me to draw from. So that's what's coming up.
Thank you, Jenny. I have an additional question for you, if you will. As you were sharing about it being a Black book in your library, and then as you processed it, and where I'm going with this is specifically about the color Black. And now that you are back in choice and get to choose when you take that book off the shelf and dive into it, is it still Black?
I'd actually say it's more white. Because what I've learned is that all of this love that didn't have anywhere to go was a reflection of myself. I'm gonna tear up, and it's just beautiful. Like, grief is so beautiful when you are present with the power of love and the appreciation of the people in your life and what they bring. It's like someone shared with me, and it's so special to lose someone through suicide. Like, there are so many questions that come up as you're looking at, like you were sharing, Stina, like, could I have done something? Could I have made a difference? But there's also so much acceptance for yourself and compassion for yourself as you go through loss, and coming to terms and loving yourself through the decisions that you made at your best knowing and at your best, understanding at the time. So much self-acceptance. And then realizing that, like, I appreciate the grief because it's like the ocean. And this is what my teacher shared with me at the School of Music that I was at the time, that, if my ocean one day becomes completely still and there's no movement, it's like I don't care anymore. Like, the love is gone. But for as long as there's just a little breeze, like there's a little movement on the surface of that ocean, like I'm still moved when I think about this. Like, there's still some bit of waves, like my love remains. And that's just beautiful. It's beautiful to keep loving. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for talking more about how you evolved and how the color of the book changed, and the energy and the light that came from it also was a choice that you made to attribute it to that. Linda, what's coming up for you when we talk about Grief is Love?
Well, it takes me back with Jenny's story to being next door babysitting and having my uncle show up at the door, which was seriously odd, and having this just intuitive, ominous hit. And he just said, your grandpa's next door, and your mom and your brother, and they want you to come home. I'll watch the kids. And I was like, okay. And then walking up the sidewalk, lived on a hill, it was just next door. It felt like it took me forever to get there. Like, I was walking through sludge. And I had some editors say, when I was writing that out, like, say, you mean mud? I'm like, no, sludge. Like, dirtier than mud. It's just got all kinds of yuck and guck in it, and it's thicker than mud. And once I got there, I found out that my father had ended his life through suicide. And it felt like out of nowhere, and he had just been home from work, just kind of down for about 2 weeks. And so anyways, my mom and my brother were further ahead of me because they already heard the news. They were already crying. And so my instant reaction was to just take care of them, the cancer in me, the nurturing mother in me. And so I just put my own grief on the shelf. And there were lots of little things that happened along the way. Like, I mean, it was like, oh, I don't have a dress to wear to the reveal, you know, so I go out, buy material, buy a pattern, make a dress, just, you know, keep busy. And so then and when I was at the reveal, I walk in the bathroom and my girlfriends are talking and they all kind of shut up, but I heard what they were saying. And one of them was now dating my boyfriend, who was that your very first love. And I was like, okay. So anyways, about a month later, I just was home waiting for a friend to come over, and she was in the house. I didn't know she had arrived, and she was all excited to tell me something. And she's like, Linda. And she comes running up the stairs. And I just, you know, just took the moral breath and I started crying, and I couldn't even talk to her, and I couldn't stop crying. And my mom finally, you know, was like, and my friend was like, I'm just going to go home. I'm so sorry I upset her. And then I found myself just sitting in my father's closet and smelling his smell, and which was barely there by then in comparison. And yeah, it was just such a crazy time. And my brain wasn't fully developed. I was going into my senior year of high school, and it was just, everything was just so raw. And then my mom helped me finish getting my driver's license, and she's always like panicked in cars, so that was real fun trying to get her to finish that with me. And then I was driving with a friend, and I went right through a red light, and she goes, you just went through a red light. And I'm like, what red light? I didn't even see a traffic light. And then I knew, like, okay, I am just freaking over the top here. And I literally, from the time that my friend came over, I was just, you know, crying for like 2 weeks straight. And my mom finally sent me to our church. We had like 7 pastors, and they, I guess, picked the pastor for me, but he had lost his wife to suicide. And I sat next to him on the couch, which was kind of weird. And we just sat there quietly. And it was such a beautiful time of somebody witnessing me, not trying to comfort me or make me feel better. And we just kind of got into this chit chat of our loved ones, and some stories made us cry, and some stories made us laugh. And I always say that, you know, to get over your pain, it's about understanding. It's about understanding your own pain, but having, you know, somebody else there who can understand what you're going through, even if they can't. But just like 𝗦𝗁𝗲𝗏𝗏 talks about empathy, and it's not like being in someone else's shoes. It's seeing someone else through their life and all the things that have happened in their life. That's true empathy. So anyways, yeah. And grief is love with nowhere to go. I heard that for the first time from Rob Party, and I really, really appreciated that. And I appreciate his work in the world and getting his story out there. And he's been on quite a few grief podcasts lately too. So have a listen if you get a chance. Robert Party, Possibility in Action.
I can so relate when you're talking about like how grief just hit you in the moment, and you just couldn't stop crying, and then found yourself in like a whirlwind of experiences, you know, sitting in the closet, taking in the smells, going through the red light that you didn't even see, and just like trying to absorb through all the senses whatever you could of your father and the memories. And I think we all process this in a different way, right? We've all experienced grief at some point in our lives, whether it's a family member, a friend, a pet. Somewhere, someone you know has passed on, is no longer with us. And the way that we process is a beautiful thing and a beautiful way to show everyone around us, not and ourselves, that there is love here. And I think that is just something to sit with. Dorrit, I want to come over to you. What's coming up for you when we talk about grief is love?
I want to talk about a different side of it. I've lost people close to me, but it's a long time ago. I've been lucky, maybe. I've lost pets, of course. But what I was thinking about is when you lose yourself, when you grieve a part of your life that you lose because maybe you have an accident, maybe you lose a limb or eyesight or something like that. For me, it wasn't that dramatic, but I knew that I lost my old life. I knew that I couldn't continue doing the things that I loved. And just a simple thing like going to work, just knowing that you could never do that. Because that gave me so much to be able to be there and help people and see that it made them maybe not happy, but it helped them in their situation and made their lives easier anyway. So not to take anything away from losing loved ones, because that's the worst. But I just wanted to set the focus on love it, losing, like grieving that part of yourself. I was curled up in bed for 2 weeks just crying because I knew that I could never go back. I would never be the same. I had lost that part of me. That was over half my life, you know, and had to start over and didn't know where to go. What's next? What do I have now that I've lost everything that I thought I was? So yeah, that's what comes up for me.
Thank you, Dorrit, for sharing. It certainly does not take away from everyone else's share. In fact, it completes it quite nicely to talk about grieving something and a part of yourself that you've lost. There's power and beauty and love in that too. And what I want to say to you and to everyone who's tuned in right now watching is that you don't need to grieve alone. And that's one way that I can support you. That's one way we can all support each other and connect with other people and show support. You don't have to do it alone, even if you feel very lonely or alone. And it reminds me of something that my father told me at my grandfather's funeral. And I found myself not in a corner. I think I was off to the side somewhere and just watching I wasn't even really in it. I felt like I was removed from the funeral, and just watching people walk by and pass by me, which I laugh about a little bit as I say this to myself and out loud, that I often feel like people are just walking right by and not acknowledging me. But so I can say that as an outsider looking in right now. But in that moment, I felt removed from it. And I remember just standing there sobbing and shaking uncontrollably. And I wasn't curled over. I was just standing there watching everybody else around me in that moment. And my father came over to me and he just embraced me. And what he said was, "You do not need to cry alone." And I absorbed it in that moment, but I didn't fully understand it. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't know what to do with that. But there's something there that we, in the moments when we feel the most alone and most vulnerable, we have other people around us that will pick up on that and jump in to support us, and sometimes without even having to ask for it. So if you are someone that is feeling grief or experiencing something else entirely, we are here to support you and help you get through it, navigate it, so that you are not sitting in it alone. And I think that's about all we can say on this for right now. If you feel like you want to reach out to us and have more high vibe conversations, you can certainly reach out and connect with each one of us on multiple platforms. We invite you to also book calls with us at your own discretion. We are here for you. The link is on the screen now if you'd like to access that and have access to us on a more one-on-one basis. Until next time, we'll say bye for now.